to the City of Mason, our special meeting of council, our 4:30 August 30th special meeting of council. It's time to call our meeting to order with a roll call, please.
Councilmember Nelson.
Here.
Councilmember Chance.
Here.
Councilmember Bradburn.
Present.
Councilmember Stricula.
Here.
Vice Mayor Gilb. Councilmember Hunterlaw.
Here.
Mayor Grossman.
Here. If you could stand with me, please, for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands,
one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Before we begin with item 4 on the agenda, just a quick reminder, as a special meeting of council, by law, we can only discuss the topics that are placed in the public notice and on the agenda. Item 4 on our agenda today is a presentation by Mr. Cohen with Keystone Lot LLC and our staff, and we're going to begin with our city manager, Eric Hansen. Eric?
Thank you, Mayor. We have some slides up. Kurt may have to help me. What I hope to do is leave the bulk of the time here for Mr. Cohen to talk about the details of his project. But what I thought would be useful is to give a brief overview of the projects. There's no way I can capture all of the details here in the time allowed, but I want to run through part of where we've been, where we're at now. So beginning with this slide, and obviously at the end of the evening, there's a first reading on an ordinance, but what the process has been is a development agreement has been the tool, and that is what the ordinances encompasses. A development agreement is pretty common for municipalities. It is a contractual obligation, but I think what's important to remember is it's not as defined or as finite as a lot of the contracts that council considers. It starts a process of steps and kind of mutual obligations that how we're going to develop a certain piece of property. So if you think of it as future-oriented, if X happens, then Y can happen, and this series of mutual anticipations. The basics of the agreement, and this is the basics of Mr. Cohen's proposal that's been discussed for quite a while, but not actively negotiated, is before you there on the slide, as well as the map to the side. The parcel of property is 2 pieces. The city owns 3.82 acres, and Keystone Lot, which Mr. Cohen represents, owns 0.74 acres. The Keystone Lot also has a building on it. So there's a structure on that piece. Those would be combined, is the basics of the proposal, to allow for a mixed-use residential and commercial project. And while the numbers may have shifted throughout the time that Mr. Cohen's been proposing this, what we're looking at in the development agreement draft is 120 high-end custom residential units with 15 to 20,000 square feet of commercial space, a total of 217 parking spaces. 160 of those would be surface, and 20 of those would be available for the commercial public use as they're available, and then 57 spaces anticipated for garage spaces, exclusively to serve the residential units. On the next slide, and again, want to move through this rapidly, negotiations, and everyone understands negotiations are a matter of compromise and to degree of what you're willing to accept. Those began on this specific project November 17th when council passed a motion for staff to negotiate an agreement. Now, admittedly, that has not been a unanimous motion or direction from council, but what I think is important to understand from staff's perspective, once that motion was made, our job was then to negotiate an agreement. We never second-guessed the basics of the proposal. We never tried to revisit the fundamentals. We formed a negotiating team that was myself, the city engineer, Kurt, and our economic development director, Michelle Blair, along with the city's law director, Jeff Forbes. And we then took the reins to negotiate an agreement as council had indicated. Because we didn't have a strong, unanimous motion there, we debated and took 4 kind of guidelines that we would follow to help develop those negotiations. And those were, first was consistency. Primarily, we were thinking a consistent approach and language as other agreements that the city has done successfully. We wanted to look for ways to improve the deal, not necessarily by revisiting the fundamentals, but looking for ways that we can make the deal more favorable to the city. Part of that was we were interested in developing benefits we could extract from the deal that would be directly to the benefit of the overall downtown area. And then finally, with council's input, we were interested in how to secure the long-term quality of the development. For the city's purposes with the property, what could we do to make sure that the resulting development was sustainable at a high quality for years into the future? So then a couple of items that I wanted to pull out that mention our ability to improve the deal is that we added some items. And I think it's difficult in this because to folks listening to this for the first time, what you don't see in either the exhibit, maybe not as much in my presentation, is items that were in the original proposal that are no longer in there. I spent a lot of time talking about things that were added or things that were modified. But some of the adds and what was originally asked for and what Mr. Cohen had been successful, other cities had commonly given him incentives in terms of waiving different fees. And what we sought to do was to, instead of waiving those fees exclusively to the benefit of the developer, to find a way that the revenues that otherwise would have been generated, we could redirect to what we call the Downtown Development Fund. I'll talk about that a little bit more later. But what you see up there is a couple of items. For example, the purchase price of the land. The development agreements anticipates $100,000. From the garage parking that I mentioned, there would be a fee assessed to those, to the residents that are buying or renting those, that over 10 years would generate as much as $175,000. The waiver of building permit fees, the developer would actually pay those development fees. The city would turn those over to the Downtown Development Fund. And then finally, and maybe most significantly, negotiated for a rental unit fee for each of the units that over 10 years, again, could generate as much as $500,000. So over 10 years, some of those would, we'd realize the revenues initially when the development opened. Some of them would be incrementally over the 10 years. There would be generate $850,000 that would be, the city would put in what we'd term a Downtown Development Fund. Particulars of that still need to be negotiated as part of the development agreement, but the intent of that is that those would be funds that the city would then be bound to spend to the benefit of downtown. I think primarily in staff's mind were things like parking. It wouldn't necessarily be exclusive to enhancing parking. It could be streetscapes. It could be road improvements, other primarily infrastructure items that would benefit the entire downtown area. Would not hurt the development, was important to it, but would raise the level for everything, including the new development. On the next page, I thought it was important. While the motion was passed in November, I think some folks have felt like the negotiations took an awful long time. And negotiations, especially if they're good ones, usually do. In this case, the motion was made in November. The bulk of our negotiating work was done in May. We were left with a couple of issues that were more complicated, that we wanted to be more deliberative on. I would qualify those as financial items, where we need to talk with how the developer's financing was work, receive some options there. Legal work on things like vacating certain streets and how that would be accomplished, as well as the quality standards that we tried to implement. We need to work with some architects and some back and forth on those. So those required a little bit more work to kind of iron out the details. Some other items that I want to mention without going into detail, but bear some relevance. Tax abatement is included in the development agreement, but significant in this, while the city would be agreeing to authorize one, or would need to authorize one to fulfill the development agreement, the bulk of the benefit from that tax abatement is from the schools, the portion they would receive. And the developer will need to handle negotiations with the schools and typically would make a payment in lieu of taxes to help offset the impact of the abatement on the schools. The developer will take the lead on that, and the city anticipates with this agreement would follow suit with whatever agreement the schools are able to reach. There's discussion of an overhead utility relocation study. That's derived from an original request was where the city would place utilities on the property or serving the property underground. Instead, we negotiated, again, in the development agreement, a study we would undertake to look at utilities in the area to find the most cost-effective way to bury utilities, maybe not just on the site, but kind of the nature of utilities, possibly bury utilities on some of the side streets or the main streets, and to find what would be the most cost-effective way to do that, potentially in partnership with the developer. There's also some discussion where we're considering a traffic analysis and how we would work together to do a study of the Main Street corridor to help identify some options that may enhance traffic, again, to the benefit of the development, but more significantly to the benefit of the entire downtown area. Discuss the Downtown Development Fund. That is an item that we understand what we're after. One of the contingencies in the agreement is that we would both reach specific terms on how that would be implemented. And finally, on this section, a sewer permit fee waiver. We had capped between building permits and sewer tap-ins the amount the developer would contribute to the Downtown Development Fund at $75,000. That means in terms of tap-ins, likely $700,000 that the city would effectively waive. What it anticipates is that council would then transfer $700,000 general fund dollars to make the sewer fund whole. Now again, that is, the developer has reached similar incentives in other communities. This was our attempt to reach a compromise where we could direct some of the benefit of that, not exclusively to the development itself, but to the downtown area in general. I think the final page here, and I hope I'm within my time, just want to emphasize that the development agreement, I know, and we sometimes get lost when we're focusing on it, it seems like that is the culmination of the development, and it really isn't. It doesn't supersede the typical development process. It really sets out some mutual agreements, some mutual ambitions, and then we follow through with a planning commission. It will require rezoning, which requires review and approval, a public hearing through Plan Commission. Those items then come before council, both for a public hearing, review, and approval. There are also a number of contingencies in the contract, both developer and city contingencies. Some examples of those that would need further discussion and approvals: the tax abatement, both by the schools and the city ultimately, terms of the Downtown Development Fund specifically. There's an element in there to the Mason Port Authority, which is not council, but if a sales tax agreement proves helpful or beneficial, it would be the Mason Port Authority reviewing and approving that. It includes in the draft development agreement, developer has obligations for some public outreach specific to the type of commercial tenants that could be attracted or incentivized to his development. Reference the overhead utility relocation. The city would be obligated to pursue a study, locate folks that could do that study and present some options. Mentioned the Main Street corridor analysis, that traffic analysis. That's still in discussions, but that is a possible future agreement. And then I had already mentioned the authorizing the general fund payment to the sewer fund. Those are some of the bigger steps that would require either further council action, planning commission action, or public input. With that, I'm sorry if I went long, but I wanted to lay out some of the basics before, and admittedly some of the boring stuff before Jim could show some of the more exciting elements of the development. So, thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Mr. Cohen, the floor is yours. Yeah, welcome.
Okay, Kurt, to advance the slides, I just use the mouse? Okie doke, thank you. My name is Jim Cohen. I'm the president of CMC Properties with offices at 7577 Central Park Boulevard in Mason and headquarters on Reed Hartman Highway in Blue Ash. I'd like to thank council and staff and the mayor for the invitation to present today. I too will keep my remarks brief, as I know that people's attention is limited and because I want to answer everybody's questions and address everyone's concerns raised during the public comment. I will do so honestly and openly and refreshingly because, unlike City Council, I am not restricted by executive session rules. I have reached out personally to several people who have raised concerns about this project at previous meetings, none of whom have returned my calls. But I've heard that Common Beer Company is concerned about their parking, and I totally get it. I am willing to work with them on shared parking. I have 2 similar downtown buildings with craft beer establishments in them, and they both love having hundreds of people living right next door. The people who live in our properties frequent local businesses on the weekdays, not just the weekends. They are active in their communities. They have money to spend. They are good neighbors, and they love cold beer and cocktails and coffee and good food. Now, I'm going to begin with a bit of a history lesson about how I ended up here. For 30 years, I've been developing commercial real estate in Cincinnati, and for the past 10, my passion has been revitalizing sleepy downtowns that have been passed over for decades. Kurt?
While we wait for that. Yeah. If we need more time in the next session, we'll recognize you as a member of the public, since we got a late start due to an equipment issue.
There we go. Sorry about
Just
that.
take your time.
Okay. Right now, I'm building a project just up the road in downtown Lebanon, where Two Cities Pizza was seriously considering opening a second location. In the process of meeting with them and showing them our other projects, they said to me, "This is exactly what we need in downtown Mason." To which I responded, "Is there a downtown Mason?" Now, prior to Lebanon, we've built new apartments in historic downtown Milford on the banks of the Little Miami River, which helped take Milford from a tired downtown with a bunch of secondhand shops to its becoming one of the cutest, most popular suburban downtowns around. In downtown Loveland, bordering the railroad tracks and bike trail, we built a mixed-use project which virtually doubled the size of its downtown and brought graders, which became the new heart of that city. In Hamilton, we became the first ground-up residential project in downtown in more than 100 years. This one along the Great Miami River, and that city has literally exploded in growth. In historic Lebanon, we're narrowing Broadway Street, adding on-street parking, building a new park, extending the bike trail, bringing bars and restaurants, and hundreds of new residents to live right downtown. Downtown Mason was a natural next project for us, and with the support of the then Mayor Victor Kidd, city staff and I went to work in earnest. Our first step, with city staff's prior permission, I went out and acquired the property highlighted in red, surrounded by city-owned land shown in yellow. The city previously had this property under contract and decided not to buy it. I advised, without that parcel, you have nothing. So now there is this interdependent relationship between 2 abutting property owners. Not in a bad sense, but just a fact. Without the city's land, my building will remain a nondescript warehouse. And without my property, the city's land will never achieve its full potential. Together, however, we've got something really great. And that brings us to where we are today. 2 neighbors working together to make each other and their community better. I do not think anyone in this room would disagree that Mason's downtown does not live up to the standards of Mason. It would be nice if Mason's residents had more downtown dining options than New York style or deep dish pizza. And speaking of pizza, Two Cities is still our biggest supporter for this project. They welcome more dining destinations downtown. They acknowledge that competition makes everyone better. They want hundreds more people living downtown, walking the streets, frequenting their restaurant, and bringing their friends. Right now, too many people in Mason have to go somewhere else when they want to entertain friends and family. The city of Mason has never been closer to having a game-changing revitalization of their downtown. Our project will represent $20 million of private investment. That is the most significant investment in downtown Mason in over a century. The city will be investing in downtown too, as it should, in infrastructure and parking. The city will contribute its land, valued at $400,560, according to the auditor's website, and we will contribute our land, valued at $403,210. The community reinvestment area allows for some much misunderstood tax abatements. First of all, we will be paying property taxes on the land, which the city currently collects no taxes on. So the taxes paid on the property will actually go up the day we close. The improvements that we make are temporarily abated, but we will be making payments in lieu of taxes to the Mason City School District and Downtown Development Fund contributions to the city. And those payments, amounting to hundreds of thousands of dollars, are specifically earmarked for downtown parking, streetscapes, tenant recruitment, and downtown business attraction. According to a Cincinnati Business Courier front page report on tax incentives, they found for any downtown project to succeed, financial assistance and incentives must be made available to entice property owners to invest further in their community. These contributions being made to Downtown Development Fund and the land purchase payments I have never been asked to do in any of the other projects that I have built. To put all of this in perspective, in return for the city contributing some excess land paid for 13 years ago when they widened the road, and providing a 15-year tax abatement on improvements for property that hasn't collected any taxes in at least that many years, we will personally be investing more than $20 million into your downtown. That would make the city's return on investment infinite, and that is called good government. My commitment to downtown is obvious. I have been working on this since February 2019, almost 3 years now. I've already invested over $500,000 of my personal savings on architecture, engineering, design, legal, and land. I've attended 87 in-person meetings on this project, and I can't imagine how many phone calls. This development will be the catalyst for long and lasting improvement downtown. We will add a downtown gateway, public focal points, pedestrian connections, and streetscapes. A portion of our rent collections will go specifically to the city for those improvements. We have plans to address the lack of downtown parking and are offering a substantial portion of our garage rents to the city to build public parking lots. We have committed, along with the city, to study, engineer, and address traffic congestion. In my decades of real estate experience throughout Greater Cincinnati, controversy about what's best for the community is rare. As I've gone through the Mason Comprehensive Plan, of which hundreds of people have participated, revitalizing downtown was raised more frequently than any other item. Of the top 10 public priorities that came out of the comp plan, downtown was specifically named in half of them. It is undisputable that this community wants its downtown to come alive. One citizen best summarized public sentiment by saying, Mason cannot be viewed as a complete community until downtown revitalizes. One thing we know for sure is that Mason has the best professional staff in the region. I have never met a more competent economic development director than Michelle Blair. Just look at her accomplishments throughout the city. Kurt Seiler is a city engineer who should be running a city of his own. He can analyze problems and find solutions faster than anyone. And Eric Hansen is as hardworking and competent an executive as I have ever met. He is a gentleman and a strategist and an effective leader who just wants to get the job done. So my goal today is to share a vision that is so compelling that you can't help but get on board. And I am asking each one of you to agree that downtown revitalization is way overdue. Unanimous approval from council is important because visions thrive in an environment of unity and die in an environment of division. Each of you should be proud to walk the streets of your city, excited and supportive of new investment and major downtown revitalization that you helped create. That is how we leverage the power of community. Thank you very much, and I'm available for questions or comments.
Thank you. I am going to ask you to come back up to be recognized as a member of the public, but for now, we need a few minutes to regroup between meetings with our technology. So council, if I could have a motion to adjourn, and then we'll re-adjourn into our 5 o'clock meeting momentarily. Is there a motion?
So moved.
All in favor?
Yes?
Yes.
Any opposed? Okay, great. Just give us a few minutes, and Denny will let us know when he's ready. Is there anyone who wanted to sign the sign-up sheet to be recognized? It's right outside the glass doors, or right inside? It's right inside if you want to take a minute to sign that. And that'll help our meeting flow a little bit more efficiently.